Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics! Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Ready to get away from the Turkey Day junk food? Dive into your weekly main course? I mean, you are what you eat after all. If you're famished for fear galore, settle yourselves in for a tale of appetite lost and found that I like to call soft flesh.
That was Deep Purple. Good morning, alumni. Before we begin our announcements, a special word regarding campus curfew. Macy's hand landed on the radio alarm with a thud. It was nearly 7 a.m., and it was time for her to begin her day. She rose from bed, and once again noticed that her roommate, Andrina, was nowhere to be found in the small dorm room with her. It appeared as though Andrina had spent her night partying and had not returned to the dorm during the night. This was typical of her. Andrina had a wild side that she tended to wear on her sleeve. Marcy stretched her body, rubbing her eyes, and gathered the things that she would need for her morning shower. Towels, soaps, clothes, and other miscellaneous toiletries. After her steaming hot morning ritual, she proceeded back to her dorm to gather up a few last things. Her cell phone and keys were among these items. Before placing the phone in her pocket, she opened up her contacts, tapped the name Emma, and placed the cell to her ear. After 5 rings, the phone went to voicemail. "Hello, you've reached Emma. Leave one." "Hey, Emma, it's Marcy. Hey, I had a wonderful time the other night. Thought you may want to go out again or something. I know you're busy. Just hoping to hear from you. Talk to you soon." Marcy hung up. This was the 3rd time that she had called Emma this week. She wasn't trying to pester her or annoy her, but she thought they had a great time last weekend. I mean, they had been intimate. Why hasn't she called me back? Marcy asked herself. Although Marcy knew Emma wasn't a very monogamous girl, Marcy was still hoping that she and Emma had made a connection. They had hung out for weeks, nearly every day, going to the mall and out for drinks at the college bar. Then, she gives in to her last weekend, and now, nothing. It's funny how women were capable of behaving like a typical guy, Marcy thought to herself. Getting what they want and then moving on. But maybe she was getting ahead of herself. Maybe Emma had only been really busy this past week. Maybe her phone had been lost or stolen. Marcy decided to just let the situation ride as she composed herself in front of her mirror before heading out the door to morning classes. Before heading up the walk towards the education department building, Marcy stopped at the college campus cafeteria for a small morning breakfast. She grabbed a piece of fruit, an orange, and a cup of coffee before exiting the refectory and proceeding to class, breakfast in hand. The morning was a dull gray that was sure to brighten up into a beautiful, sun-bathed late spring afternoon. Marcy dropped her empty coffee cup into the trash receptacle inside the education building and entered the monolithic doorway. Marcy sat in the back of the lecture hall, not because she was a lazy student who wanted only to obtain the credits, but she was shy, and this left her fearful of being called upon. Sitting in the back had other advantages as well, such as possibly having a vacant seat next to her instead of being surely crammed in towards the front. While listening intently and taking detailed notes, "Hey kiddo, what's up?" Startled, Marcy shot her head to the right and found herself face to face with a beautiful redhead with profound green eyes. It was her roommate, Andrina. "Shh, what happened to you last night?" Marcy inquired. "What's wrong? Thought I'd been the latest victim of the campus ripper?" chuckled Andrina. "No, I didn't think that, and that's not funny. I simply thought you'd been out all night drinking and prostituting yourself," Marcy replied with a smirk. Both girls looked up to see the professor glaring at them for being distracting during his lecture. Andrina sat next to Marcy, and both girls remained silent for a minute. The professor had gone back to his speech, and Andrina leaned her head towards Marcy so as to continue conversing with her in a less disruptive fashion. "Did you hear about curfew?" Andrina asked Marcy. "They're pushing it back to 8 o'clock now." 8? That's insane!" Marcy exclaimed. "Yeah, well, apparently it's because there was another murder last night. Some girl named Stacy was found skinned alive or something in her apartment." Marcy half expected her to drop Emma's name, but at least then she'd have a reason for not calling her. "Oh my god, do the police have any leads?" "Nothing that I know of, only that the killer is apparently exclusive to the alumni of Penn State." Marcy drifted off into thought. "Where you at, kiddo? Hey, why don't you and I go out tonight?" Andrina nudged. "Go out? We can't go out, remember? Curfew and the killer? I'm good friends with the security guy at our dorm, and don't worry about the campus ripper. We'll stick together. Safety in numbers, right?" Andrina persisted. The two eyed each other cheerfully, but Marcy had noticed something more in Andrina's eye. A desire for her seemed to be present in Andrina's deep green irises. Marcy turned away awkwardly. It's not that she wasn't into women. Actually, she preferred to be with a woman. There was a safety that seemed to be an inherent part of it, at least in theory, Marcy thought, as Emma passed through her mind. Andrina was pretty, and Marcy did always have a thing for redheads, but Andrina liked to party, and fidelity was not typically conducive of this kind of lifestyle. She was sure that a relationship with Andrina would end in disaster. Still, the thought intrigued her, and the pair had become pretty good friends after nearly a year of living together. So, Marcy decided to brave the awkwardness of the situation and agree to Andrina's proposal of a night out, despite the lurking potential of coming face to face with a madman. Due to the couple's chuckling and quiet conversing, it didn't seem like long before class had ended. Marcy and Andrina stood in their place and collected their materials. Andrina had finished placing her effects in her bags first, and this proved to be significant, because before Andrina turned and left Marcy to finish up by herself, Andrina initiated a friendly hug, which ended with a more than friendly kiss on the cheek. Marcy stood bewildered and blushing as Andrina filed out of the aisle and through the doors, turning with a smirk and a wave as she did. By the time Marcy had followed her path out into the campus grounds, Andrina had disappeared from sight. Although it was the middle of a gorgeous spring morning, the grounds seemed relatively empty, and only a few students trotted here and there, making their way to various buildings and lecture halls. There was no fear of the Ripper. Marcy turned left and down a small path in an attempt to beeline to her dormitory. The gap between the tall college structures on either side was empty and silent, with only the sounds of chirping birds and distant passing vehicles making the only audible noises to be heard. At the edge of the passageway, near the opening to an exposed meadow, stood a tall figure, covering his head with a black hooded sweatshirt, smoking what looked like a cigarette. As Marcy approached the silent shadow, it turned at her and shot her a piercing look. She knew who it was. It was an acquaintance of hers, Danny. Danny hung around in the same social circle with Emma. In fact, Danny is the conduit through which Marcy met Emma. Maybe he knows what the hell's going on with her, Marcy thought. "Hey, Danny, how's it going?" Marcy inquired as she approached Danny. Danny said nothing. "Hey, have you seen Emma lately?" This elicited a barely noticeable snicker and snide facial gesture from Danny, something Marcy picked up on immediately, even with the concealment of Danny's apparel. "No, I haven't seen her all week. Figured you know better than anyone, Marcy," Danny replied. "What's that supposed to mean?" Marcy asked him, noticing the same desireful look in his eyes that she had noticed in her roommate's. "Nothing. You know. Never mind. Hey, are you busy? You want to go hang out or go—" "No, I've got things to do." Marcy cut him off before Danny could finish. "Hey, I'll see you around," Danny exclaimed as Marcy walked away. Marcy shrugged the comment off, trying to ignore it. Not only did his previous remark imply the logistics of hers and Emma's relationship getting under her skin, Danny had begun to give her the creeps lately. He reminded her of a stalker or Unabomber. Maybe he's the Ripper, Marcy thought to herself. This made her laugh a little as well, as Danny was built much like a woman, scrawny and short, and the thought of him running around campus, tearing up unsuspecting girls, seemed a little ridiculous. Still, something about him made her feel uneasy. Quickening her pace and refusing to look behind her, Marcy double-timed it back through the security of the front doors of her dormitory. Marcy stood in front of her mirror, brushing her long, blonde hair. After molding its lengths up into a ponytail, tied with a ribbon, she reached for her eyeshadow. As she stared at herself, lining her bright blue eyes with soft purple makeup, her thoughts began to focus around Andrina and her earlier obvious advance. She knew getting involved with her roommate would be a bad idea, but she decided to entertain the notion for the night, allowing herself to be unbound from the recent stresses of her life. She was going to have some fun. With this reassuring line of thinking, she decided to go with the black dress instead of the yellow one, hoping to spark Andrina's interest, even though she was futilely attempting to convince herself otherwise. She checked herself in the mirror one last time, giving herself one last overall appraisal before leaving her dorm to meet Andrina at the local college bar in accordance with a text that she had received an hour and a half prior. It was nearly 8 when she left and already pitch black outside. The taxi, however, was waiting out front. The driver attempted to make small talk, making a couple of comments regarding the pleasing nature of Marcy's appearance, but Marcy ignored the comments, nodding occasionally and responding in short yes or no answers. Her thoughts centered on Emma and Andrina. Wouldn't a night with Andrina make Emma jealous? Marcy thought to herself. Probably not. She probably wouldn't even care, considering she hasn't even attempted to contact all week. Then, Marcy's thoughts drifted to Danny and how he said that he hadn't heard from her either. Although she pondered the strangeness of this for a moment, it wasn't long before her contemplations began to focus on Danny's behavior and the threat of a madman on the loose. As she dug deeper into this concept, the taxi pulled up outside the bar. Marcy paid the cabbie before exiting the back and entering the loud college bar that could easily be heard from the street outside. Marcy walked into a crowd, but it didn't take more than a second to spot Andrina towards the back of the bar, standing near the wall. She was wearing a medium-length black skirt and a pink t-shirt, which looked to be at least a size too small, with "Cutie Pie" written across the chest. The smoke-gray eyeshadow that lined her eyes underscored the green gems that were encompassed by it. Marcy smiled and waved as Andrina motioned her over for the rendezvous. The two of them laughed amongst each other, shuffling off the random guys that attempted to pick them up for about an hour before Marcy had noticed. Maybe it was due to her having a slight buzz, or maybe he had just shown up. But there was Danny in a booth at the end of the bar, staring at her and her date. Although there was a ton of people in the way passing back and forth, and although he was wearing the same black hoodie, she could see him clearly, as now he had the hood of the sweatshirt hanging off the back of him, off of his head. "What's wrong?" Andrina asked, leaning in close so as to overcome the loud music and chatter. "See that guy over there? He kind of creeps me out, and I think he's staring at us," Marcy insisted. Andrina leaned in closer and began to nibble her ear. "Tell you what, let's get out of here," she whispered. Marcy cocked her head to one side as the sensation tingled. "We don't have to leave just because of him." "Oh, so now you're saying you don't want to get out of here with me?" Andrina jested. Flustered, Marcy quickly retracted her last statement and agreed to head back to their room at the dormitory. As the girls stood and gathered their belongings, Marcy glanced up at Danny, who was now talking to some other drunken bar hopper that was behaving more than promiscuously. In either case, he had stopped staring at the pair and added falsifiability to Marcy's theory. It didn't matter, though. Marcy was more than happy with her decision to head back with Andrina. The couple left the bar, hand in hand, completely forgetting about a killer stalking their campus at night. Between the security of the cab, the enjoyment of Andrina's company, and the secure feeling of returning back at the dorm, incessant worry did not seem warranted to Marcy. As Andrina had promised, the security guard met her at the door with a nod and allowed the two to pass inside. "How do you know that guy, the guard?" Marcy inquired as they made their way up the stairwell. "You don't want to know," Andrina chuckled in reply. This type of comment from Andrina was usually the type of statement that would put Marcy off, but she was determined to just enjoy herself for one night, without worry of related drama in the days to come. The two made it back into the small dorm room and sat upon Marcy's bed. "Oh, wait, hold on a sec," Andrina stated. Before Marcy could inquire, her roommate was on her hands and knees, pulling a small suitcase from beneath her bed. She pulled a small, black bag from its interior and, after unzipping the top, she opened the velvet satchel in a similar fashion. Andrina dug around inside, searching through its contents. A second later, she pulled 2 small glass bottles from inside, one filled with whiskey and the other filled with vodka. "You like whiskey, right?" she asked Marcy. "Yeah, you've been keeping these under your bed?" "Yup. It's always good to have a stash. You never know." Andrina laughed. The two of them opened their bottles, toasted to each other, and drank the contents inside. Andrina sat back down on the bed next to Marcy as the couple began to stroke each other's hair and kiss one another. Marcy felt instantly drowsy and fell into an unarousable sleep. Marcy opened her eyes, slowly and heavily. The bland white ceiling awaited her. She looked around the room and saw nothing but her dorm room, at first. She was in her bed. When she went to sit up, she found that she was unable. Her hands and feet were bound to the bed. She looked at her limbs to see what she was being held back by, and when she looked down, she noticed that she was naked. She went to scream out for help, but was unable to do that as well, as her mouth had been stuffed with rags and bound tightly with cloth. She began to shake violently, trying to get free. That's when Andrina came into her range of vision. My, you are pretty. I've been wanting to taste you for a while. Besides, with curfew and police presence being what it is, I have to stay in tonight." Andrina bent down once again to pull something else from under the bed. Marcy cried and tried to scream from behind her gag, but her attempt was met with futile failure. "You're probably wondering what's going on. Well, if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm the so-called campus ripper. I know. I've actually been doing this for a long time. I mean, my parents, my brothers, my whole family has done this for years. It's how I learned. She stood back up with another black satchel, placing this one on the bed beside Marcy. Your skin is so smooth. You really are absolutely beautiful. You know that? Marcy cried for mercy and release, but was unable to voice any such plea. So soft and supple. Did you know that women have an extra layer of fat beneath their skin? It's why women are so soft. Andrina talked on. That's what I think really adds to the texture, she said, kissing a quivering, naked Marcy on the forehead. There is one little fact that the police have been keeping to themselves. The victims aren't skinned alive, per se. They're carved. You see, I love the taste of long pig. I'm sure you've never tried it. It's what cannibals call human. The meat gets its name from having a strikingly similar taste to pork, only a bit stringier. Andrina pulled a carving knife from the bag and dragged the blade softly against Marcy's stomach, across her belly button. Marcy's eyes were wide in fear, streaming tears from the crying that had not stopped. She shook her head side to side, trying to signal for mercy, but Andrina seemed only not to notice or care. Well, they say you don't shit in your own bed, so that means I'll be leaving tonight. But I'll have to pack a snack. Andrina stuck the knife into Marcy's flesh at the bottom of her rib cage. Marcy screamed beneath the cloth, tightly binding her jaw, but Andrina kept carving, filleting a large flap of flesh from the right side of Marcy's ribs. Blood oozed onto the bed at Marcy's side, bubbling and trickling out, eliciting a look of excitement and revelry from Andrina. Marcy shrieked in agony as best she could before breaking down into tears, violently shaking at her bonds again, makeup running down her cheeks and burning her eyes. Andrina took the flesh in her hands, now carved free from Marcy's body, and placed the corner of it in her mouth to take a bite, snapping it with an elasticity as she pulled it from her teeth. Andrina chewed. You're probably surprised that the killer is a woman, but hey, you like women, right? Well, so do I. Andrina stated with a sickening smile, gnawing and processing the chunk of Marcy's flesh that was being grinded beneath her teeth. I mean, I'd let you have a taste, but I'm sure you would undoubtedly scream if I took the gag off, which I would have to do if I were to do such a thing. Marcy cried and screamed at her captor once again. Sorry, hon. I would have never loved you anyway. Andrina took the knife and slowly slit the throat of a sobbing Marcy. As Marcy choked and struggled for air and freedom, the soft and gentle suckle of Andrina drinking blood from her wound was the last thing she felt before passing into death. The following day, someone had reported a strange smell emanating from the room. When the police arrived, they found the grim remains of a young woman tied to her bed in her dorm. The M.O. matched the other cases regarding the butcher-like carving of the body and bite wounds scattered about its entirety. The cause of death? Neck wound/blood loss. Carvings and bite marks exhibited post-mortem. The only thing about this case that seemed different to the police was the circumstances of the girl's roommate, who was now being investigated as both a potential suspect and potential victim. It wouldn't matter, however. Andrina was not seen again. How do I know all this?
How do you think?
They say a pound of flesh symbolizes a significant bond, but I don't think Marcy expected the special bond that she would share with Andrina. When dissolving in someone's intestinal tract, that's about as bonded as you can get. If you find yourself craving more carnage, stop by again next weekend as we kick this horror show into December. And until then, remember to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.